Good afternoon. This is a public hearing for the 2023 through 2027 five-year consolidated plan and the assessment of fair housing. It is 3:31 p.m. It is Tuesday, April 18th. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. To my right is Vice Chair Ty Menzer. To my left is Commissioner Gary Edwards. Also in the boardroom, we have County Manager Ramiro Chavez, as well as Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell and Clerk of the Board Jamie Caldwell. This meeting is being live streamed through our Thurston County YouTube channel. The purpose of this public hearing is to accept and consider public comment on the 2023 through 2027 five-year consolidated plan needs, assessment, and housing market summary, and the assessment of fair housing. This is a combination virtual and in-person public hearing. Those wishing to testify have joined by Zoom, in-person, phone, emailed in comment, or mailed in comment. I will correct that as there is no phone. So they have only joined by Zoom, in person, emailed in comment, or mailed in comment. If you wish to testify, please visit the Thurston County homepage online and select announcements of public hearings on the left-hand side. The information to join this public hearing remotely has been posted there. If you do not wish to testify but would like to listen and follow along, please watch the live stream through the Thurston County YouTube channel to help us manage attendance. Our staff, Tom Webster, will provide information on this topic. Assuming those on Zoom wish to testify, I will read your name out loud. County Manager, no. I will read names on the sign-up sheet 3 at a time, so those in, that's not, I apologize. You will have 4 minutes to testify. Time may not be given to another person. When you're called on, please state your name and address for the record. The clerk of the board will help review the timer. The public hearing is now open. Tom Webster will now present background information of the report, written comments submitted, and any additional information requested by the board.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tom Webster, Manager for Thurston County's Office of Housing and Homeless Prevention. So I have try to keep it a relatively brief presentation for you today. So really talking about 2 separate documents that we are required by the Department of Housing and Urban Development to present. The first one is the Assessment of Fair Housing, and this is actually a joint plan that is developed by Thurston County, the City of Olympia, and the Housing Authority of Thurston County. And this plan was developed by Krista Lenson with the City of Olympia. She led the development of the plan. And this plan is really to inform the consolidated plan, which was required every 5 years by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So this plan for this year is for the 2023-27 program years. This plan is developed in conjunction with the City of Olympia. And we've contracted with David Stelheim from Mudbay Consulting to help us with the development of the consolidated plan. So I'm going to start talking about the assessment for fair housing. This is something that county, cities, and public housing authorities are required to do to ensure that our projects and efforts do not worsen segregation, discrimination, housing problems, or other disparities. This is something that is required by HUD every 5 years. Right now, HUD is actually in the development process of a new affirmatively furthering fair housing rule. So we'll submit this plan, and then we'll be subject to that new rule once it comes out, and then in 5 years we'll be subject to that rule. But this plan complies with HUD's current rule, which is still in a draft form. So under fair housing law, there's a fair number of protected classes that the Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination against. I think many folks are familiar with these: race, color, national origin, religion, disability, sex, and family status. Within Washington State, there are other protected classes as well: honorably discharged veterans, or military status, marital status, and immigration or citizenship status. There's also in Washington State, the Landlord-Tenant Act prohibits housing discrimination based on source of income. For the Washington State, the top 3 there, those are reported and investigated by the Human Rights Commission in the state of Washington. The discrimination based on source of income is not investigated by the Human Resources Commission. So City of Olympia undertook a county-wide survey and reached out to various partners, stakeholders, and citizens and asked for input on their experiences with fair housing. And some of the high-level findings from that are that people of color and people with disabilities and people who are transgender and single mothers have a higher rate of cost burdened in their housing, are more likely to be renters, are at higher risk of displacement. They face eviction more often. They're more likely to experience homelessness, and they face continuing housing gaps in home ownership in Thurston County. Thurston County residents are also more likely to experience and report discrimination based on source of income, disability, race, and family status were the four most common self-reported reasons of discrimination. Other findings from the survey include Thurston County is lacking accessible and affordable housing units to meet the needs of residents with disabilities. There's a need for increased infrastructure and improved access to transit is important for the disabled community. Mold, high heating and cooling costs are top environmental health concerns that were reported. Native American households face greater difficulty in accessing opportunities based on where they live. And while substandard housing and overcrowding issues do not show up as within the data that we have, do not show up as a significant issue, we think those are underreported, and anecdotally we know that there are people living in RVs, which are considered substandard housing, or in garages or other informal settings. So we think there's an underreporting of those living in substandard housing. And then overall, the more than 600 community survey respondents indicated that affordable housing is key to housing choice and should be a priority for the county. Some more background. So over the past 5 years, there have been 45 fair housing complaints filed with the Washington State Human Rights Commission from Thurston County. 33 of those were based on disability, 10 were based on race, and 4 were based on family status. However, of the 600 individuals who responded to the online survey, 38% said they know that either they or someone they know has experienced housing discrimination in Thurston County. From those who are reported, many of those indicated that they know someone who's experienced discrimination based on source of income, and others were based on disability, race, or family status. Only 12% of community survey respondents reported that they filed a complaint, a discrimination complaint. 63% said they didn't pursue a complaint because they didn't think it would make a difference, and 68% said they didn't file a complaint because they didn't know who to contact. Again, based on the survey respondents, the top 5 strategies that people identified to increase equity and reduce disparities among protected classes was to create more affordable housing or financial assistance for low-income households, increase access to home ownership, create a variety of types of houses to meet various family sizes and needs, reduce barriers to accessing housing through such as criminal history and credit history as a barrier. And then for number 5, there were several items that tied in terms of education about rights under fair housing laws, education about responsibilities for landlords and other housing providers, and better enforcement of source of income protections. The plan calls out several goals, and I won't go through each of these specific tasks, but just at a high level. The first goal in this plan that we're proposing is to increase affordable housing and provide a financial assistance for housing for low-income individuals and families. That was the number 1 priority identified through the survey, and that will be done through a variety of activities. Goal number 2 was to increase access to home ownership. This includes creating web-based information for the public regarding homeownership support, especially focusing on credit counseling, down payment assistance, and those types of things. Goal number 3 is to increase housing in a variety of types and sizes to meet various family sizes and needs. So suggested activities for this include around parking and requirements, creating ADU plans that increase enhanced accessibility design, and striving to ensure matching funds for developers seeking housing trust funds for developmental disabilities set asides, among others. I will note that many of the activities identified here are already incorporated in the Olympia, Tumwater, and Lacey housing plans that they've been developing. So we really tried in developing these goals to work in conjunction with cities are already working towards creating. This has also been shared with the Regional Housing Council. Goal number 4 is to reduce barriers to accessing housing. So in this task, we're looking at exploring costs to contract with a third-party organization to provide training to landlords and tenants on fair housing, looking at models that other counties have used to reduce barriers to entry, and then review additional policy options from other jurisdictions. Goal number 5 is to increase fair housing and source of income discrimination, education, outreach, and enforcement. So a suggestion to create an update a web-based and print publications about fair housing and how to file complaints, offer fair housing related trainings and presentations to landlords and tenants, lobby the state legislature to strengthen and adequately staff the Human Rights Commission, and then also to explore a contract with a third-party organization to provide training on source of discrimination housing laws. And then finally, the 6th goal is to improve environmental health in housing units. So looking at providing funding for rental property owners for energy efficiency upgrades, provide training around mold treatment and prevention, and to review best practices and codes from other jurisdictions that adequately address mold prevention. One of the things we heard is that the current county codes and also city codes don't really address mold prevention in housing, so wanting to look at that in more detail. So that is a quick run through of the assessment for fair housing and kind of the findings and the goals for that. Moving on to the consolidated plan hearing. So HUD requires for the consolidated plan that we develop every 5 years that there are 2 public hearings. One happens at this stage after we've done a needs assessment, and then a second public hearing will be held in June once we have the final plan for your approval. We're also making amendments to our citizen participation plan in terms of when we need to come before the board to make amendments to those plans. So the consolidated plan process goes through a data analysis looking at our priority needs and working to develop goals, strategies, and allocations. We then draft the plan. So we have a 5-year plan, and then we have an annual plan within that 5-year plan that we bring to each year when we identify the specific activities that we're going to be funding. And that gets approved by the county and the city of Olympia before it gets submitted to HUD. So with our HUD funding, we receive, as you know, an allocation of community development block grant of around $1.2 million a year, which works out to just over $6 million over a 5-year period. And for the Home Investment Partnership Program, that's a little over $800,000, or roughly $4 million over that 5-year period. So in looking at the housing and community development needs in our community, we're seeing that within Thurston County, the housing types and mixes, we're seeing more multifamily housing and smaller units, 1 and 2 bedroom units, and our housing stock is getting older. We see that median home prices have gone up 55% since 2015, and average rent has gone up 39% since 2015. For the Housing Choice Voucher Program, the cost per unit for that program has gone up 36% since 2017. We also find that 54% of extremely low-income households, and HUD defines extremely low-income households as those making 30% or less of area median income, that 54% of those folks are spending more than 50% of their income on housing. With our homelessness needs, we see that the length of time that people have been homeless has increased since 2017. However, we do see exits to permanent housing have also increased since 2019, and returns to homelessness has decreased since 2018. And with our performance measures, these come from the state, from the Department of Commerce. We're basically on track to meet our performance measures. From our community, we see our population is getting older. The population of those 65 and older has increased by about 20,000 people over the past 10 years. However, there's been a net decline in the 25 to 29 and 50 to 54-year-old age groups. For employment, our county has added over 2,000 healthcare and social assistance jobs, and as we know, government represents a substantial portion of the workforce. We also, for the con plan, reached out and conducted community and stakeholder engagement. So working with Paul Knox and Beth Dolio, we interviewed city and nonprofit leaders, surveyed targeted nonprofits and other community leaders, and conducted focus groups over Zoom. From those results, the community survey shows that creating affordable housing is by far the #1 top priority for the community, followed by public services. And within each of those, you can see there's subsections for the types of activities that are supported by the community for priority funding. So that stakeholder input talked about the need for increased senior housing, increased facilities and infrastructure, rent assistance and not just new construction, and talked about processes for identifying priorities and selecting projects for housing. So moving forward, we will develop action plans. As you know, our CDBG funds rotated every 3 years. City of Lacey is receiving funding this year in 2023, and next year will be the City of Tumwater. And we have a RFP that's gone out on the street, and we're actually in the process of reviewing applications for the home funding this year, and we'll be bringing those to you in May. Finally, the Citizen Participation Plan lays out how we engage with our citizens. So we are making some amendments to that plan, including adjusting the amounts for when we make an adjustment to a plan of when we need to come and do a public hearing. So this increases the amount up to $50,000 for a change in project funding, which is up for $30,000. We're also adding, including kind of urgent need projects, and contingency projects if a project fails or falls through. So with that, I know that was fairly quick, but happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner Edwards.
Tom, you said something about low income, the percentage of income that those folks are paying at 50%. Does that percentage include the utilities?
Yes, it does. So when we talk about cost burden, HUD's target is that you should pay no more than 30% of your income on housing, which includes utility costs. And so severely cost burdened is when you're paying more than 50% of your income for housing plus utilities.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you. Questions, Commissioner Minzer?
So on the assessment of fair housing piece, and there's these goals, and there's these activities. Are these activities intended to be government activities like us?
Yeah, so broadly.
Like to give you an
yes.
example, like goal 2, increase access to home ownership. So provide funding for home ownership activities such as credit counseling or down payment assistance. That's us doing that?
So broadly speaking, it is, it's also the Housing Authority and the City of Olympia. So all of us together have, are working on, some of those will be more specific to us than others. Some of these City of Olympia is already working on, or the Housing Authority may be working on. So not every one of those activities will be the sole responsibility of the county. Some of those may also be things that we work with our housing action team or through the Regional Housing Council to develop. As I said, some of these are our activities that the jurisdictions have already identified that they're going to be working on. So we're really piggybacking on that work that's already in those housing action plans that the cities have developed. But by and large, they are government actions, whether they're city or county or housing authority.
And then how does this work? Like if we don't do any of those things, what happens? Or if we do some of them and we ignore others, like are we on the hook for something? How does this get?
Yeah.
What are the consequences?
Yeah, good question. So for now, the way it works is we will report to HUD each year as part of our annual action plan. We report on progress we made against the fair housing. But the reality is at this point, there really are no consequences. the expectation is that with the new rule that HUD has proposed for this plan, that there will be an increased level of monitoring accountability. So we do expect, for this plan, probably not a lot of consequences for not following through on everything, but moving forward, we think in the new rule, there will be increased accountability related to fulfilling your fair housing plans.
And it sounds, tell me if you think that I'm right. Like, it looks like there's a fair number of things that we're not already doing, like they're kind of new, like in terms of creating web information about homeowner. I never saw us as the local county government like going to that degree of helping people learn about owning homes. And you know what I mean? That's kind of on like a private market.
Yeah, I think there's more we can do to kind of connect people to information, like to help them identify where to, not that we have to be the ones providing all that information, but I think there's an opportunity for us to better educate the public and connect them to those resources that are available in our community.
You have enough staff to accomplish these goals, or you have a budget request to ask us to hire more people to do all these things that are in this plan?
No, we do not have a budget request that is going to be associated with this plan.
That was going towards my question, right? Because looking at these goals are great. I'm not saying they're not, right? But like, I'm thinking, what's the financial impact to it? And is HUD going to allocate funds for us to meet these goals, or is it just?
Yeah, there's no additional funding from HUD to meet these goals. So this is part of being incorporated in the work of our office. But yes, we are not going to be asking for additional budget authority or staffing to fulfill these. We'll be working in partnership with the City of Olympia, the Housing Authority, through our Regional Housing Council as we look at RFP and the funds that we do have. We're wanting to make sure that these priorities are incorporated into the projects we fund, but there'll be no additional resources to fulfill these goals.
Your team does a great job in the work that they do. But again, is this like, I feel like it's an additional workload, right? And so it's just, and there's some things that we can maneuver and add to our processes, existing processes, but some of these items, it's a whole new wave of workload. And I'm just already thinking from, how overburdened your team already is. And this is just like adding another layer on top. And, it's just, again, I guess I'll circle back to Commissioner Menzer's question. It's like, how is this not another budget request?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So might be a good time for an update from county manager or about the Regional Housing Council, because you've mentioned them at least twice as potential solution to this problem. There was a plan put together for more to create a director or some kind of staffing, like where's all that stand?
Yeah, we're still working at the Regional Housing Council as to how the administrative side of the Regional Housing Council can be beefed up. The board authorized one position. We're in the process of I don't know if you already hired that new position or not.
No, so we do have a new communications person on, and we'll be coming to you hopefully very soon for a reclassification request to support the Regional Housing Council.
The Regional Housing Council needs to go through the process recommending what positions we should be added to the program. Because you are absolutely on point at the level of the amount of work, and just from a health perspective, all the support that Tom and his staff has provided to the Regional Housing Council, the regional level for the last 2 years has been remarkable, but it's not sustainable. And that has been part of the conversation with the Regional Housing Council as to how they need to be proactive in setting aside funding to support and building that infrastructure to support the Regional Housing Council. And this is part of that. It's all those strategies that we need to work together as a region, but we need to address the staffing levels. And Tom has been very direct in the past that he needs help, and the Regional Housing Council needs to be part of that solution as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to be clear, like, I support all of this, but we've laid, irrespective of what HUD said, Thurston County Commissioner stepped up and added the home fund. There's 2 advisory committees. There's an ILA to combine it with Olympia and to create processes to get everybody at the table. I mean, we've added a lot of stuff because this is important to us. So I'm just a little nervous that, like, okay, here comes HUD, do, coming to Thurston County. You guys need to do all this stuff. Well, maybe other counties need to hear all that, but I feel like we've got our priorities and we've got our strategies and we've got our funding geared toward the things that we're trying to do, create more permanent supportive housing units, create more, affordable housing all the way down to, emergency shelters and all that stuff that we're trying to do with the hotel and project up in Lacey and et cetera. So I don't want to get derailed because we've got this plan that's from the outside. Somebody knows nothing of what's going on here. So, I mean, we got to do it, but I don't want to run afoul of any federal funding or federal rules. And I want to get whatever we can out of it. But my priority are the things that we've decided are most important for our local community because we're here, not in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, great, thank you. And I will say that in developing this, we really tried to make sure that this was in alignment with those existing goals. So there are some new things in here to kind of build on, but as much as possible, we tried to kind of marry them with things that we're already moving forward with, that the jurisdictions are working on currently with some of these things, what the Regional Housing Council is doing, creating the permanent supportive housing, some of the home ownership things that are going on. So we really tried to not create a whole new separate plan, but really have this integrated into existing plans with some additional things that are very specific to fair housing.
Maybe following up to that conversation of staffing and resources, I can work with David and Tom to see if we can bring this matter before the Regional Housing Council in the upcoming meeting, because the revised ILA has already been approved by all jurisdictions, so that is in place. And as I recall, the ILA includes a set aside of, I believe, 10% for administrative costs across the board. So that gave us the opportunity to really start building that resource, the unit, and I believe addresses exactly what you are talking about. So let's work on that, David, Tom, to make sure that we bring that item to the Regional Housing Council and they can provide some recommendations for additional staffing to the Board of County Commissioners.
Yep, happy to do that.
Okay, any additional questions for Tom? Okay, then we'll go ahead and we will accept public testimony. And so there is no one signed.
1 second. Didn't Tom say you were gonna give us some more detailed information about input you got from Habitat for Humanity and Olympia City Council?
Yeah, so thank you. We did receive public comment from Habitat for Humanity on both the con plan and the assessment for fair housing. The essence of their comment was that homeownership is critical, both from a fair housing perspective, also, and as a priority for our community, that homeownership is important. So that was kind of the one written comment we received. We were told that the City of Olympia was going to provide comments on our plan, but I have not received anything formally from the City of Olympia at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, there's no one signed up on my sheet, and
I think we have only.
David, there's our consultant who helped us work
on
developing the plan, so.
Okay.
That concludes public testimony.
So with that, are there any additional questions or comments?
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Commissioner Edwards?
Aye.
Commissioner Menzer?
Aye.
Commissioner Mejia?
Aye. Next, are we ready to move forward with the motion?
Move to approve the assessment of fair housing and authorize the Public Health and Social Services Department to submit the report to Housing and Urban Development.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
No, ma'am.
I'll call for the vote.
Commissioner Edwards?
Aye.
Commissioner Menzer?
Aye.
Commissioner Mejia?
Aye. Okay, so with that, this public hearing is now done and we are adjourned. Thank you.